Okay. First verses of 2015. This is the start of a lot more like sleepless nights and more movie watching and rewatching. So this battle was something we talked about a long time ago, and
The original idea was Grease and Saturday Night Fever,
yes,
but I thought that I just thought American Graffiti fit better on.
yeah, I can see that. I mean, they're both. I used the term "lost in the '50s" as my cryptic comment because even though it doesn't take place in the '50s, American Graffiti has a lot of '50s influence in it.
Yeah, Grease is set in '59 and American Graffiti is set in '62, but George Lucas took inspiration from all those '50s teen movies, like,
And it shows.
yeah.
Sock hops, malts, and milkshakes, and Bobby Socks, and seriously, these are two movies that really fit together quite well. So we're going to see them do battle in the first verses of 2015. It's Grease versus American Graffiti. AJ, take it away.
Well, we're actually going to start with Grease.
Really?
So, naturally, Grease is probably one of, if not the most famous musical of all time. Can you think of one that would be kind of a...
Musical? No. Everyone knows the music from Grease. And the sing-along they did when they did the version that came out with...
that.
I really wish we would have got that. That would have been awesome.
We never get things that cool.
I know, but it's still cool that it even happened.
So, naturally, like most movies that are this legendary... it's all about the way it's made and the content, because the story is pretty thin. Naturally, it is the Danny and Sandy meet on the beach over the summer.
Yep.
And they fall in love. And I really like the setup that it's not like a mute cute thing and we see them like do their thing and then they go their separate ways. When we meet them, it's the end of the summer and all this has already happened. And they're about to part ways.
Yeah.
It's like if you caught the very end of Before Sunrise.
It covers all the bases before you even get started.
Yeah. And then, they say, they don't know if they're going to see each other again, and it's all romantic. Love's a many splendored thing is playing as the waves crash. It's like intentionally cheesy.
Oh, of course.
And so they go their separate ways. And of course we see that, Sandy's like, the virginal type, that it's been kind of sheltered, it seems. And Danny's like, the head of the T-Birds. He's got the leather jackets, and he gets into trouble, He doesn't... I don't think he did the James Dean thing where he's got the cigarettes in his short-sleeved white shirt, but...
He still had the short-sleeved white shirt, though.
Yes, naturally.
Of course.
So, Roll Without a Cause is something that really was...
Oh, definitely.
Fit in what inspired these movies, among many others. And then, of course, it turns out that it's now the first day of school, unlike in American Graffiti, where it's like the last day of summer before college. And even though we see a full school year in Greece. It starts with the first day of school, and lo and behold, Sandy is going to ride L.I. now.
Of course.
And they run into each other. And she sees who he may or may not be the real him. For a while there, we're not sure if who he's with the Sandy is the real him, or who he is when he's with the T-Birds is who he really is. But I think generally we all know that Danny's the soft type.
Oh yeah.
The guy on the beach is who Danny really is. And he has to, pretend to be cool around the T-Birds, and it kind of, pushes her away. And naturally, she goes after some other dude, and Danny has to win her back. Even though we never, ever get to know that other dude. I think she literally just grabbed him and said, pose as my boyfriend. Because we never get to know anything about him. We only see him from a distance. Like, they're most likely not even a real thing. It's probably just the, hey, will you be, like, my cover here?
Hey, when I point to you, just, like, point at me.
And then we have all these side characters. We have the rest of the T-Birds. We have Rizzo, who is Stalker Channing. This is the role she's really well known for. And we have the Pink Ladies. Frenchie gets her own side story for some reason.
Yeah.
Just all of that.
I love the beauty school dropout stuff with Frankie Avalon. That's always one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah. Sid Caesar is the coach.
Yes.
And this movie is just iconic scenes galore.
Oh, yeah. And music.
All the way from that opening shot where we see, you would think it's such a great introductory shot. It makes you forget we've already met Danny in the beach scene. That moment where everybody's gathered around and they say, like, hey, Danny, and he's there and he's facing the wall, and then he turns around and faces the camera.
Even the animated credit sequence, I've always enjoyed it, too.
Yeah. With the song that turned into the tagline for the movie.
Yep.
And on top of... okay, obviously there's the iconic numbers.
Yes.
We have most everybody's favorite Grease Lightning, which, you know, is... I don't know how many times it's been parodied and reconstructed and everything. Everybody wants to perform Grease Lightning.
Listen to those lyrics when people do the high school plays. They have to change a lot of things around. But back in those days, it's kind of like when I watched this movie, I didn't know what those words were. They were just words.
There's the big elaborate dance scene. Like the scene where they're at the dance. I mean, there's a lot of elaborate dance scenes. I mean, the dance scene.
Yes.
There's the great number. I've always loved that shot where it always makes me laugh too. Where Danny's singing his heart out at the drive-in, and he's sitting on the swing set with the screen behind him.
I love that song so much.
And you see it's like the concession cartoons, and you see it's the marching ice cream.
Yeah, it's like the stuff they play on the B-roll with sci-fi at Hollywood Studios.
Yeah. Like I said,
Summer Lovin' is an iconic song.
Yeah, and then, you know, it's, you know, we have the fun numbers and we have the sad numbers. We have the romantic numbers, like Hopelessly Devoted.
I love Hopelessly Devoted.
Though you mentioned it being a favorite of yours,
yeah.
I always questioned why the Frenchie number with Frank Avalon was in there, because it felt a little unnecessary.
It's away from the Sandy character. I guess we're trying to give the Pink Ladies a little bit more of an identity.
Yeah, because like every time I watch this movie, I just think, why do we need to know this much about Frenchie?
Because Diddy Kong needs to be standing there looking in awe at Frankie Avalon, looking like an angel in front of everyone.
Yeah. But on top of this, one thing, like everybody remembers the numbers, everybody remembers just how iconic its status is.
Yeah.
One thing I think is really, really underrated about Grease is how funny it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The movie's hilarious. My favorite sequence in the entire movie, apart from the musical numbers, has always been the moment where he decides that he's going to go into the athletics to impress Sandy.
Yes.
So he's going from sport to sport with Sid Caesar trying to do this.
Him trying to wrestle is hilarious.
There's the wrestling, and then there's the basketball scene where he's blocking the guy and he can't get the ball out of his hand, so he just punches him in the chest. And then, what I love about that too is he punches the guy in the chest and takes him out and turns around and says, "What I did?"
He doesn't know what he did wrong.
My favorite though is the baseball scene.
Yes.
Where he can't hit the ball for shit.
Nope.
And the catcher is egging him on. And so his Danny's retaliation is to grab him. It doesn't even do anything to the guy.
Nope.
It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't make him fall back or anything.
It's just funny.
He just pulls the mask back and hits him in the face. Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I love the moment where we have the Mooners at the dance.
Yes.
And then the next day at school, they're on the intercom, and the teacher says, it's in the background because you just hear her say it, but she says something like, "We are going to find out who the Mooners were. We know people in the FBI that can track people this way."
And like you see them in the background. They're like, "Can they really track us?"
But then there's some other stuff. This is a movie that has spawned a lot of fan theories. To say the least.
Yeah.
Two come to mind in particular. For starters, the subplot with Rizzo's pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
That has caused a lot of questions because the movie's really, really vague about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because for starters, obviously we see her and Jeff Conaway in the car. And they're doing the thing where they make it. I love the moment where he's like saying, "Oh, Rizzo." She's like, "Call me by my first name." I think Betty's her first name.
Yeah.
And then there's the moment where you know it's going to be important because he's got the condom and he realizes it's broken and he says, well, I've had it since 7th grade. And then naturally when they're at the drive-in, she has the very colorful piece of dialogue of, I'm like a defective typewriter, I missed my period.
That's a great line right there.
Now, yes, the movie is very vague about this because she talks about how she's going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got a whole vague musical number about it.
Yep.
There are a whole lot of theories surrounding this, and I don't think there's one. I think there are a few that people will absolutely stick to and say that is the absolute truth. But the movie is so vague, we don't know.
It's done on purpose, I'm sure it is.
There is the possibility that, I guess she was trying to hide it from him because it wasn't his.
That's possible.
There's the idea, because when they're at the carnival at the very end, they just wrap it up real quick, and she says, hey, guess what? I'm not pregnant.
Could be that rat-faced guy, maybe.
It's
probably it.
Another possibility is that it was just, a scare.
Yeah.
And, just nothing. It was just, she thought it was something and it wasn't.
Possible.
The most popular theory seems to be that her musical number about it is about having an abortion.
I wouldn't necessarily be surprised, but
I know, because it was
draw your own conclusion.
That was pretty popular in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
Because we had, this potentially touches on abortion, Fast Times touch on abortion, Dirty Dancing.
Yeah, that's true.
It's totally possible.
Yeah, definitely.
But the movie's just so vague about it, and it helps to kind of go into that it might be a dark territory, because to my understanding, every time they do school productions of this, the pregnancy number is always cut. The whole storyline is always cut out.
I'm not surprised.
So, yeah, it's really hard to say. You can do your theories if you want to. And speaking of theories, obviously, what makes Grease would not be the absolutely fantastically great movie it is without the ending at the carnival. That our really nice race scene flows into.
Yep.
Where Sandy's sitting there and she's saying, she's basically singing goodbye to herself. And that's when Sandy is changing her way. A lot of people think this is a really bad message, and I get where they're coming from there, but Sandy basically decides to change her ways and basically take the greaser image with Danny. And then they have the great couple of numbers there at the end. The scenes that have just been recreated and reconstructed, and just everybody knows.
Of course.
I mean, if you know all the words to We Go Together, you're a god. However, still, it's great. However, it spawned another theory. And I kind of like to ignore this because I love the happy romanticism. Because that's just the kind of person I guess I am.
Yeah.
But there is a very dark fan theory here, and it does make you wonder about the fact that the number and the movie ends with them getting in the car and driving off, and they start to fly off into the clouds.
Yeah.
The theory I've heard most is apparently Sandy, I guess she kind of somewhat loosely makes a reference to something like this in one of her songs. The lyrics not jumping out at me, but the theory is that she drowned at the beach. And then she's in kind of some happy purgatory while she's at Rydell High. And then once she's graduated and she's with Danny, she goes to heaven. I don't know.
Goodbye to Sandra D makes more sense if you want to go in that direction. After that, she's like, okay, fine, it's over. Yeah. And Danny died on Thunder Road. That's another idea that people had too. Which could have happened as well.
So yeah, because you want to see it as, happy romanticism and stuff like that. But it is weird and totally random. The movie ends with them flying into the clouds.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So it's really hard to say.
Not many people are acknowledging their existence either, so...
So, I like to think it just has a romantic ending.
Yes.
And the clouds thing is just something fucking random. But, you can think what you want to think and interpret how you want to interpret it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's just me. So yes, I think I touched on everything here.
I kind of love this movie, and I always have.
Yeah, and of course, you know, John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. It was supposed to be Marie Osmond.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, but
she's a very nice lady.
Yeah,
I've met her several times actually.
But Travolta, it's so easy to see how, because Travolta already, you know, had done Saturday Night Fever and gotten the Oscar nomination and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's easy to see how he just really took off after this, because he's like, has there ever been a more appealing lead actor in a particular lead role than John Travolta in this movie? No. I just love, like I said, he's the main reason the movie is so funny, too. I particularly love that moment when they're in the diner and he's apologizing for the way he behaved around the T-Birds and stuff like that. And then she's pointing out the guy that she's with. And just his delivery of, like, she's saying, you know, like, oh, are you jealous of him? And he's like, me? Jealous? Don't make me laugh. Ha, ha, ha. That delivery.
It's good stuff right there.
Yes. So that's great. It's probably one of the better performances in a musical.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And characters in general. So there's a reason they've reached that iconic status. Then we have American Graffiti, who, real quick, was kind of I wouldn't say an Oscar juggernaut, but it did very well.
Mm.
It got nominations for picture, director, screenplay, supporting actress, and I think one more that I'm dropping on. It might have been a sound one or something.
Mm.
And like I said, it's a different story. Whereas Grease was set in school, American Graffiti is what's going to happen after high school.
Yeah.
Where it's mostly, you know, it's the age-old plot, the characters wandering around aimlessly, trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives as they either go on to college or just go into the real world. What's going to happen. And the four we follow are, the main four that we follow are, Kurt, who is Richard Dreyfuss, who's basically our lead character, more or less.
Yeah.
And then, I'm blanking on character names here. I think Steve was Ron Howard's name. And then we have John, who was like, you know, the bad boy type that's in the yellow car. And then we have Charles Martin Smith. And Richard Dreyfuss is the one that kind of... all the other three kind of have their little own stories going on, whereas Dreyfuss's character is just kind of going... kind of much like the character himself, because he's still... the whole movie, he's trying to make the decision of whether or not to leave for college. So, he himself kind of personifies that throughout the movie, because his character is the only one in the movie that doesn't really have a straight line kind of story.
Mm.
He's just going from event to event, and just getting around random places in the night. Because he starts off with his ex-girlfriend before he ends up getting kicked out of the car, because he wants to go after, there was a girl that mouthed "I love you" to him from another car that he'd never met before in his life, and he wants to track down who this girl is. And then, you know, he falls in with the Pharaohs after he accidentally scratches their car. I always like the line, "It's not the size, it's the principle." And then, you know, he gets in the Wolfman Jack scene. Ron Howard's story is probably the weakest aspect of the movie. It's basically just him and his girlfriend fighting. That's pretty much all it is. Because he's going to be leaving her, and they're deciding whether or not they want to see other people, and you get the hint that maybe he just wants to, you know, screw around with other women. It's not about maintaining their relationship or anything. Charles Martin Smith's character is, like, the nerdy guy that's kind of the outcast of the group that doesn't really belong. And he eventually meets Debbie, played by Candy Clark, who was nominated.
Mm.
Which I thought was an interesting nomination. She's not my favorite. My favorite of the supporting cast is probably Mackenzie Phillips as Carol. Like, if I was going to give somebody the supporting actress nomination, it would have been her. But I think it's kind of an interesting and weird nomination. I don't mind that Candy Clark got nominated.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, there's John's storyline where he wanted one girl, but instead he got her little sister, who's underage, who is Carol. And then they're driving around all night while drag racer Bob Falfa is looking for him, because they're kind of setting up for a race that Falfa is not going to let him get out of. And there's kind of that nervous feeling of everybody looking for each other over this night. And, of course, talking about familiar faces, Bob Falfa is Harrison Ford.
Yes.
Complete with a cowboy hat and a Chevy. Playing one of the biggest douchebags in movie history. Pre-Han Solo, naturally. Yeah, a lot of people forget to associate this movie with George Lucas because it is so weird. Because he had his original sci-fi movie with Robert Duvall, which is referenced on the license plate of John's car, of course, because it is in every George Lucas movie. And then he had Star Wars, and in between those was this, where it was kind of like he was trying to kind of do an autobiography, coming of age thing. So not many people a lot of people forget to associate it with him, even though he was nominated for it. And Francis Ford Coppola was the producer on it. So there was a whole lot of accolades going into this movie. Yeah. The only person not involved with it was Spielberg, but this was kind of before Spielberg's time. This was 2 years before Jaws. I can't remember when Duel was made. I think it was 71 or something, but it was just a TV movie at the time. Now, there are a lot of... While it does, while Grease, had a story and had, musical numbers and stuff like that, American Graffiti is more of just a series of events. But it does it in a perfect way. It still feels cohesive despite just jumping around to our four main characters doing random things in the middle of the night. Because it's compiled completely of memorable scenes. Like, there's the moment where Dreyfus joins the Pharaohs by hooking, the back tires of the car up, and, that whole thing that we've seen in a million movies since. Because not only was this inspired by 50s teen movies, but it was also a massive inspiration for God knows what.
Oh, yeah.
Happy Days being one of them.
Definitely.
And then there's, there's two race sequences between John and Falfa, actually, but the bigger one at the end. There's the great scene with Candy Clark and Charles Martin Smith where the car has been stolen and they're walking through the woods in the dark, and she's just nonchalantly telling him the story about the goat killer. He's, trying to change the subject, but, it just, and then she just abandons him there in the dark. It's a very funny scene. And then the other moment with him where he's standing outside the liquor store trying to get somebody to buy alcohol for him. And the first guy not only buys the wrong thing with the money, but just takes off out the back door with it. And then the one guy just goes in and it's just like, I'll pick up whatever you want. And then the guy goes in and 20 seconds later he comes back out and he's fucking robbed the place and he just throws him the bottle and takes off. The best scene in the movie, though, has to be... this is really played out in movies now, this little setup, but it's just magic here. It's the scene where Kurt goes to the radio station where Wolfman Jack is, because everybody listens to Wolfman Jack.
Yes.
And he goes in, and it's just some dude there. And he's like, I was hoping maybe I could talk to Wolfman Jack. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, but he's not here right now. So he's like, well, okay, but I just want to, there's a girl in a car that told me she loved me, and I need to find out who she is, so I want to send her a message and dedicate a song to her. And the guy's really, really friendly with him, offers him popsicles and stuff like that. And then just says, okay, you know what, I'll get the word to Wolfman Jack, and I'll be sure that your girl gets this dedication. And he's like, okay, thanks. And then Kurt leaves. And then we hear Wolfman Jack's voice, and Kurt turns around and sees through the crack in the door that he was talking to Wolfman Jack.
Yep.
Like I said, that kind of setup has been played out so much now, but here, it's just a perfect moment, and I love it. And overall, the movie is just, obviously it's most well known for just being this great nostalgia thing. Like I was talking about with The Outsiders, it's a period long before a lot of people's births. But besides that point, anybody can watch this movie and somehow feel nostalgic in some way. Whatever that may be. I don't know, well... I hate to sound old and shit, but I don't know if, teenagers nowadays can maybe feel that way, but, there's something about this era to where somehow, even though it was, 40 years before in 62 it would have been 30 years before I was born, there's still something totally nostalgic feeling about it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you feel like you could have lived in that era, that it's, you know, the good part of it, I mean. So, there's that. And then, what really, really makes this movie for me, like I said, it's really, really funny. Is a good thing. You know, it's this great feeling of nostalgia, and it's got a lot of great moments in it. You know, you've got the mooning people from other cars, you've got, you know, spraying the foam on, you know, them, and slashing people's tires when they make you mad. You could get away with it. All of that fun stuff. The whole movie just feels like, despite the fact that there's kind of that looming thing about, you know, what are you going to do with your life, the whole movie has a really fun feel to it, because it's the last night they're going to have fun. And everything is, you know, great and dandy up to that point. And then the movie just punches you in the gut at the very end, where it does a where are they now for the 4 main characters. And it's not happy. John was killed by a drunk driver shortly after. Charles Martin Smith's character went off to war and went missing in action and hasn't been heard from. Ron Howard's character was supposed to go on to do great things, and he's just selling insurance and just living in the suburbs. And Kurt ended up in Canada as a writer. And it's just really like I mean, even though they didn't, like, you know, in, you know, Ron Howard and Richard Dreyfuss's cases, they didn't, like, go on to do, like, absolutely nothing, but for knowing that their life was, like, totally ahead of them, it's a downer ending. Now, mind you, we are ignoring, you know, both of these movies have sequels that most people don't like. More American Graffiti I've seen, I remember practically nothing, and I think it totally ruins the downer ending that the first one brought on, that really added an effectiveness to the movie. Mm-hmm. Grease 2... okay.
I've never been a fan of Grease 2, though. But the songs are not even as
I thought Grease 2 was okay. There is somebody I know that, you know, actually kind of, I think, prefers it, if I remember correctly. Which is certainly unique.
Someone I knew used to prefer the Sister Act 2 versus the original.
So, but when you look at them just as these, like, especially with American Graffiti, you've really got to ignore the sequel if you want to, you know, really feel something for this movie. Because I thought it just really... You know, generally it would seem out of place and weird to have, you know, the, hey, everything's great, everything's happy, everybody's having fun. By the way, this is what happened to them. Doesn't that suck? Mm-hmm. But the whole movie is kind of leaning towards that, because despite all... The whole thing is about they're having fun in spite of the fact that they don't know where their lives are going, and they could totally end up as, you know, dead-end lives. And that the movie had the balls to go there really, really speaks about how effective it is. And you realize that the story is greater than what it comes off as on the surface. And I think that's why it has reached the acclaim that it has. It's tough, but if I had to choose between these two, I'd go with American Graffiti. But they both do what they need to do. Yeah. So they both have reached their status rightfully.
I mean, with the American Graffiti, with me, it's like the Mel's Drive-In. It's emblazoned forever at Universal Studios and all the parks. There's a different Mel's every single one. And every time I walk in there, I just get that 50s nostalgia. And you feel like you're in American Graffiti. And you feel like you're walking right in the movie.
Another great thing, I mean, you could say the same thing about Grease, but I'm sure, but the thing that really stands out about American Graffiti also is it feels like one of those movies that you can watch it and then not watch it for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
But then when you watch it again, you remember everything. Mm-hmm. You remember, like, every detail. And I think that really speaks about something. So, yes.
So ends the first versus battle of 2015. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about gang warfare.
Not in the way you're thinking.
Nope. That's why I want to be very vague about it. I think that works pretty well. Mm-hmm. So, You got a better one?
It's, to an extent, it's that.
Gang warfare, but not exactly what you're thinking. So yeah, just try to put context clues into those ones. Now, tomorrow is going to be our worst list of 2014. That was a fun video, and that's going to be out tomorrow. Tuesday, we've got a lot of stuff coming at you guys. A lot of movie reviews, a lot of awards, prediction videos coming at you guys. Obviously, the normal segments, Vlog of Randomness, as well as the Sip and Snack, and back to AJ's movie reviews next week. So, continue to watch along with the different movie segments here on Pop. So, AJ, any parting words?